Coming up next on this episode of the Unlock You podcast.
So we want to be aware that
Yep.
if companionate love is forming, the way that you do that is by being someone who is truly safe for the other person to take their armor off, take the false self off, and really be seen with their flaws and imperfections without being rejected. What you're doing is now creating a corrective experience and classical conditioning that now they feel safe with you, with all the things on the inside that human nature we hide and compartmentalize and show the world our shiny self. When someone can experience being in a relationship with you and they feel truly seen, known, valued with flaws and imperfections, picture it like they go out and we've got armor on and we go and do business and conduct in the world and we lead and we have this war mindset. And then at home, you really want to cultivate an environment. That's why nagging or control or possessive is so detrimental, because you have to armor up at home. But if you leading for yourself, irrespective of what the other person is doing, by taking the initiative to say, how can I serve that this person feels safe to take their armor off? And our home is truly an ecosystem where love and safety and security thrive. Welcome to Unlock You with Dr. Shannon Crawford. And we are back with Bill Senyard, and he is amazing. So many resources, free. Just start there. And if you haven't listened to it already, last week we shared the episode on parenting. And this time we're talking about romance. Everything from how do you pick the right person? How do I know? All those questions that we all have. And then once you've picked the person, how do we stay in love and keep a committed relationship that flourishes with time? So thank you so much, Dr. Love, for bringing us into this exciting conversation.
It's good to be here, and I'll try to tread carefully here in case my wife is listening.
Yeah, right. Okay. So for all of the people out there that want to find the one, the right one, and they're asking, is this God's will? How do I know? Is it a connection? Is it a feeling? Is there just a burning bush somewhere, a neon sign? How do I know?
Oh my gosh.
What are your thoughts?
First of all, let me promote. I've got a Valentine's trio of podcasts coming up on love. I call it "What's Love Got to Do with It," the Tina Turner song, and we're going to go into the neuroscience of love and dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin, love and sex, and so we'll talk about why am I going stupid? Why am I just thinking of the person over and over? Why am I afraid of breaking up? And why have I forgotten everything else in my life? Why is my brain doing this? But here's the bottom line is all of that's subconscious. I mean, in many ways, it's chemicals that my prefrontal cortex can't even touch, can't even initiate. Yeah. So my prefrontal cortex, particularly if my amygdala, gets involved, my prefrontal cortex is shut down. And so when people are in love, particularly in the early stages, they're not being reasonable. They can't be reasonable. They're just trying to figure out and explain these feelings. I'm feeling wonderful. I'm feeling adored. I'm feeling loved, feeling safe. And it could be totally wrong. And their friends could be saying that the lady is a jerk, vicious, she's a user, he's a user, a gold digger, right? But you can't hear it because you're not being reasonable. The ancient Romans, this will be part of the podcast, they saw love as dangerous. Love confused the gods. Aphrodite, the goddess of love, was confused by love. Apollo, the god of reason, was confused by love. So they tried to regulate the emotions of love. And Paul, the Apostle Paul, walked into that when he wrote his letter to the Romans and so forth. So love is very, very dangerous. So I don't think there is a universal right choice. I know,
popping bubbles all over the world.
I know, and here's I'm a biblical theologian. Here's my thing: is that the love of God is different than our love. Our love, the Romans got this right, is very object oriented. If something is beautiful to me and it makes me feel good and feel loved and feel honored, I go for it. God's love actually loves the unlovable, actually loves what society would call the rejects. It's incongruous. It doesn't make any sense. But it is his love coming out from his heart that actually makes the object lovable. So it's
Mm.
a whole different thing. So if a husband and wife are married, there's actually a love that can tend to make the other person even more glorious and more worthy and more lovable
Mm.
and make them feel that way. So actually, it's not if I love, that's a very self-focused thing, is real love makes me want the best for my partner and vice versa. And that's when things start
Mature.
happening well.
Mhm.
So I see love very different. God's love is very other oriented.
Mm.
My love, twisted post fall, tends to be very self oriented.
We call narcissism.
And we could call it narcissism. There's a Latin phrase for that, incurvatus in se, which is the self turned in upon itself. Augustine used it. It's the essence of all sin, but it's the
Mhm.
breakdown of relationships. When I'm saying, "What spouse? What are you bringing to me?" versus
Mm.
"What am I bringing to you?"
Oh, I love that. And I joke about narcissism, but in reality,
Mm.
all of us are egocentric. All of us
Uh,
have a leaning toward narcissistic self-love,
Thanks. I'm
self-gratification.
so glad I came today. This is great. I appreciate that. Now my wife's going, yeah,
Okay, I
that
like
makes
her
sense.
now. Okay, now I like her. And I love what Danny Silk, he also has some really great resources on couples and relationships.
Yep.
And he has a program called defining the relationship, I believe. And he talks
Mm,
about how this young man they were doing couples counseling. And he was like, oh, I just love her, man. She just feels so great. I just feel amazing when I'm with her, blah, blah,
hmm.
blah. And Danny Silk's like, you don't love her. You love the dopamine
Yeah,
cocaine feeling
that's
that you
exactly
get when
right.
you're around her. But you're
Right,
not actually developing a real love that
right,
lasts. And many of us,
right.
because of Hollywood and growing up on Disney romance, we are looking for a euphoric feeling.
Yep,
And then without the end of the credits, the movie playing on,
right,
of how do you actually do day-to-day life? So I'm hearing
right.
you debunk that we're not just looking for the one with the unicorns, but do you think that God has an assignment that some people are more compatible together or not?
He may be. That's way above my pay grade. When couples start asking that question, that's a red flag for me that they're looking in the wrong direction.
Oh, tell me
Because
more.
God's love actually loves your spouse. Particularly if they're a Christian, if they're sons and daughters of God, God loves
Uh-huh.
them with all the love in the universe. He can't love them anymore. He can't love them any less. So when I'm counseling people who are so pastors, we
Uh-huh.
have couples come to us when it's basically over. They want to check the box. They were headed to the lawyer. They've written up the papers, but somebody
Yeah.
said, "Did you talk to the pastor?" Oh, what do we have to do? So I basically asked the wife, "So tell me, why do you hate your husband?" And she goes on for 10 minutes. And I go, "Look, if half of that's true, I would hate your husband too. Husband, tell me about your wife, same thing." And then I separate them and I have one come in and I say, "So you're a Christian, you say, and your husband is a Christian. So I've
Mhm.
got I've got a bigger problem right now. I mean, if what you say is true about how they've been treating you or not treating you, I get the anger. I get the reason you want to leave them. I would too. But here's my bigger problem is how does God feel towards your husband, even after all the bad things they've been doing to you?" And the spouse would usually go, "Well, yeah, he loves them, but that's God. I'm not God." I'm going, "Yeah, but here's the problem: is you're hating somebody that God loves." So here's what I want to do. I'd like you to do this for 10 days. I give them this prayer that I hand out. And I say, "I just want you to pray this for you. Don't even think about your husband. If you have to pick up kids, don't go on a date. Oh my gosh, you just kill each other. I just want you to say this prayer twice a day that talks about God's love for you, that you would begin to experience the height and width and length and depth of
Mhm.
Christ's love for you. Get your cup filled a little bit. Don't think about the jerk and do
Mhm.
that for 10 days. Let's talk." And I do the same thing with him. And then in 10 days, Dr. Crawford, it is shocking the changes that are made. Not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, usually one more than the other, but marriages have been saved. what I've done is I've shifted, helped them shift off of all of the hurts and wounds and fallen expectations and shame. Why was I so wrong? What was wrong with all those things, to actually accessing a different love for their spouse.
Mm.
In Ephesians, Paul asks for the Ephesians, and they're going to mess up big time. We know that from Revelation. He says that he's asking for power from God through the Holy Spirit in their inner being, so that they can begin, just hold on,
Yeah.
to grasp the height and width and length and depth of the love of Christ for them and for others, is the implication. So when I talk to parents who have the Holy Spirit, so they say, that's what they believe, and they're not accessing love, there's been a breakdown, there's been a barrier established, and all I try to do is move the barrier so they can actually access God's love for this unlovable, horrid person. And that's what God does. Love does innately. The parable of the prodigal son, the parable of the Good Samaritan, and so on. So it's actually shifting from my broken love created by inner working models that are self-serving, self-protective, narcissistic, and shifting to this power that I can access that doesn't look like me. And my wife deserves that.
Oh, it's so good. So a lot of times, like we've said, you can get the dopamine, the oxytocin, you can get all these highs irrespective of who you're with. And that's the same of how we develop affairs, because you can create a connection neurochemically, and it doesn't mean it's actually a grounded, substantial love with a real foundation that you're invested into. So for anyone who's listening right now, if you have all these warm and fuzzies, it doesn't mean it's the right person if it's outside of your marriage. If they are an intern and they're helpful and they listen to you and they're great, it does not mean that you actually have love. It just means pheromones and hormones and chemicals are reacting. And 5 to 10 years down the road, you will have the exact same bottoming out of like, why am I with you? Right. But if
or somebody slipped you some cocaine or crystal meth and you were unaware, and you would have kind of same feelings.
Exactly. But if we're choosing strategically to invest in this person, we have a higher investment, a higher yield in the long run. And so I love the research about, companionate love is where it transitions from the beginning, where it's this euphoric, but now you're developing a best friendship, someone that you feel so safe and known and seen. Which
God's love is not object driven, it's subject driven. It's different, and we've all felt it. When we who are Christians, and I know some of your viewers aren't, and God bless them, but when we have felt it, we Christians, we the first thing we feel is, but I'm not worthy. I'm a sinner. How can God love me? And that's exactly this amazing love of God that loves sinners, that loves hurtful people, loves narcissists. I don't. But his love does. And if it's loving through me, it is remarkably different.
Yes, absolutely. So we want to be aware that if companionate love is forming, the way that you do that is by being someone who is truly safe for the other person to take their armor off, take the false self off, and really be seen with their flaws and imperfections without being rejected. What you're doing is now creating a corrective experience and classical conditioning that now they feel safe with you, with all the things on the inside that human nature, we hide and compartmentalize and show the world our shiny self. When someone can experience being in a relationship with you and they feel truly seen, known, valued with flaws and imperfections, picture it like they go out and we've got armor on and we go and do business and conduct in the world and we lead and we have this war mindset. And then at home, you really want to cultivate an environment. That's why nagging or control or possessive is so detrimental, because you have to armor up at home. But if you leading for yourself, irrespective of what the other person is doing, by taking the initiative to say, how can I serve that this person feels safe to take their armor off? And our home is truly an ecosystem where love and safety and security thrive. From
That's
that
good.
place, now you're creating companionate love. And there's a bonding and a hormone connection that
Yep.
actually imprints, just like with orgasm, that there's
Yep.
certain imprints that happen only
Oxytocin.
specific times. Same when I can feel truly known and seen, and all this beautiful eye contact and safety and security, which means I need to be diligent about my triggers, about my criticism, judgment, contempt, discontent.
Yeah.
We need to
Self-aware.
really be taking that to the Lord and saying, okay, what in me continues to find something wrong in relationship? Instead of assuming it is something wrong with them, which it could be, but what if I start the conversation with curiosity, going, what in me needs to be healed and redeemed? Because maybe there's an archetype or a template in my past of always looking for what's wrong, being
What are the
discontent,
chances?
feeling insecure. And now it's getting reenacted in the current relationship. And I don't realize that they have to armor up around me. And I'm wondering why they're not soft and tender and sweet and romantic like at the beginning, because now they've put a bunch of armor because I've got these little quills and I'm poking them on accident.
That's right. No, that's really good. And I imagine with your work with CEOs, men and women, they probably come home and struggle with that maybe more than the rest.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You're on in CEO
Performance.
mode.
Sure. Bottom line. Let's get this thing going.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I believe it.
Well, that's a great point. Thank you for saying that, because it's really important that we create margin in between roles. So for instance, let's say someone, male or female, has been with the kids all day and they've been running ragged. They've been trying to get arguments settled and tasks and everybody going where they're supposed to go. It's really important not to accidentally take that energy and treat your spouse like they're one of the kids. Same if you've been in a work setting in a leadership role all day, and now you come home and you haven't created margin to actually shift brain waves, you're going to come home and still be the CEO at home or whatever manager or whatever role you are. It's really imperative that we actually are intentional. We are physical beings. That means I have to partner with my neurochemistry and brain waves rather than assuming that it's automatic.
And you probably have a podcast that teaches people how to do that, because it's not like I'm just going to stop for coffee on the way home or a beer.
Yes, I don't, but I will now that you said that.
I'd like, and let me know when you do.
Okay.
Pastors can be, we're kind of the worst in both, in both. We're always on ministering to other people, right? And our spouses don't want that.
No, people don't actually want to be fixed. The statistics of therapists.
Not me, but other pastors I've heard
other
of.
people.
I've
Speaking for someone else.
I've read that somewhere.
Yeah, but therapists as well. So anyone who's listening who thinks you have all the answers, be careful. People don't like to be therapized when you come home.
Well, I'm a big fan of the attachment theory to help spouses kind of see where they are and where their spouse is, not to minister to them, but to be aware of hurtful ways that are just subconscious. So I know you're a big fan of attachment theory, and there's 4 categories. Secure is the unicorn in the room, where we all like to be, and this is the person that dysregulate so smoothly. They work with other people. Their counselors love them because they listen and they respond, and it's just non-existent. The 2 big categories are anxious. So the anxious person, they use other people to emotionally regulate still, is something they didn't learn in childhood. And so they will manipulate people into relationship in order to feel better about themselves, their enoughness. And so one person described it this way: being in relationship with someone who is acting out an anxious attachment style can feel like dealing with an angry customer while staffing a support complaint desk, because they're externalizing typically. They want you to fix them. They want to talk about their emotions, which is usually anger or depression or sadness. They tend towards perfectionism because they've learned that they get noticed if they're perfect. They want to get credit. They want to get they hate FOMO. They hate missing out on jokes, and they don't want to talk about your day. They want to talk about their day. They need to hear that they are enough in your eyes, and we've talked about that in the previous podcast. They desperately need to hear before that moment that you're their biggest fan. that you have eyes only for them, that they are beautiful in your eyes, that they are worthy. You're so proud to be their spouse. You would buy stock in them. And they need to hear that over and over and over, because for whatever reason, back in infancy, they
Mhm.
didn't get a sense that they were worthy of the
Yeah.
attention of their caregiver.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people can resonate with that. And even just having that articulated, I think some of us may even be hearing that and resonating. So the good thing is,
Mhm.
while that may be a template, that may be a life experience in the hard drive, there are upgrades. And
Yeah.
so, what's really sweet is therapy, not counseling. Counseling is like we're solving problems at the conscious level. Psychotherapy is more at that psychodynamic level where we use the
Okay.
relationship as the vehicle of change rather than
Mm.
technique driven. So, a lot of people don't know the difference in training models. So, if you go to a psychodynamic therapist that can help you actually work through it, where you kind of project your stuff onto your therapist
Interesting.
and then
Good
use that
distinction.
as the process. You can also do it with a really secure, attached person who is choosing and electing to do this. Now,
Yeah.
they can't be your source or your God where you expect them to do that forever.
Right.
But there are seasons where the Lord allows a corrective experience through relationship, where you can
Absolutely.
have those insecurities. And now, what you want to do is not just continue to go to them. You've had the template, the
Mhm.
experience, but now internally you start to
Mhm.
digest, or what's called introject. You
Mhm.
take that
Mhm.
in, and now you go, okay,
Mhm.
me. Now I'm going to offer that reassurance, security. I see
Yeah, that's
value and
good.
worth in you. Now you're creating an inner world based on security.
Mhm.
And there's a
Mhm.
parlay there that happens through external relationship. But if it stays
Yeah,
external, then
that's
I'm
good.
entitled, I'm frustrated, I'm mad at you because you used to be reassuring and now you're neglecting me. And so I'm going to act out, etc. Instead of
Yeah,
going, I'm
that's
going
what
to
we do.
use this as scaffolding to help
Right.
imprint. And now the
Right.
onus is on me to be responsible,
That's
to
really good.
self soothe, redirect. Hey, me that's feeling anxious. And in my
Mhm.
imagination, I'll just have my clients picture, like, hey, picture picking up this part of you that
Mhm.
is feeling anxious. Let's be present and experience
Mm.
near with this part of your soul. This is not your spirit, that's not your true self, but it
Yep.
is a part of your soul. And
Yep.
so bring reassurance, just like David
Mhm.
talked to his soul in the Psalms, where he said,
Mhm.
soul, you
Mhm.
will bless the Lord. And I'm
Mhm.
not seeing that like you will. It's
Yeah.
more like, hey, I'm going to invite you into relationship. I'm going to draw you
Yeah.
close.
That's
And
good.
through that, you're now creating an internal secure attachment style. So if
Yeah.
someone's hearing this, I don't want you to feel overwhelmed and ruined and it's hopeless, but
It's normal.
recognizing it's super normal, and it's
Yep.
creating a
Yeah, it's
landscape
good.
where now you can empathize with others, you can
Yep.
be self-regulating, recognizing your inner
That's good.
triggers, and then working through them with mindfulness, journaling, and then
Mhm.
visualization where you're connecting with those parts of self.
It's
And I
good.
do have videos on internal board meetings to help break that
Oh,
down.
I saw the titles. I'll have to track those down. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, please do. Okay, so we have
The
secure.
story I run to biblically, by the way, is a great example of this, is Jesus with the woman at the well.
Mm,
How he treats her
mm,
is, I mean, I'd have to watch your podcast, but it's probably that. He treats this poor lady like she was the most honorable,
mm.
and and she begins to feel it. You could see it. You can hear it in her response. Anyway,
Yeah.
so so back to attachment theory. The
Uh-huh.
other major category is avoidant. So we talked about
Mhm.
anxious. Avoidant, that's me. We have a strong sense of enoughness. It's just connectedness has hurt us somehow. And I've
Mhm.
got lots of counseling for that. I don't want to bore
Mhm.
your listeners, but there's some. So I put up boundaries. I can be self-sufficient in order to not get hurt.
Mhm.
So if I'm married to someone who is anxious, who's trying to manipulate me to draw me into conversation to hear her anger or angst or embarrassment or shame, whatever, I'm having red flags go up and I'm pushing away and pushing away, which causes her to come closer and closer and closer.
Yeah.
And there's just ongoing conflict
Mhm.
until I understand more what she's doing. doing and why she's doing it. It's not personal.
Yeah.
And she understands why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's not personal. I have these broken inner working models, and so does my spouse. So if a couple is mixed marriage, I call them anxious and avoidant. And let's say the anxious, let's say it's the woman, could be the man, but let's say she has an affair. And we're processing, why in the world would she have an affair? If she was anxious, it could be the classic rom-com where she's trying to get attention from her husband. That would be a subconscious, normal, she's responsible for decisions. You're with me, but there's reason behind it. That is it doesn't make her an evil person. It sometimes makes her a subject, a victim of her own brain in some ways. And if the husband is the avoidant one, he might react with, see, I knew it. That's why I can't trust her. That's why I can't get close, because I get close to people and they hurt me. I'm never going to get close to them again. And until we actually dig deep into why we're having those reactions, which are normal human behavior in a broken world, we're not going to get to, in my opinion, to healing. Both people are looking for the same thing. We're looking for that safety, that relationship. I forget what you called it, but I like the word, where it's safe, where we trust each other, and we really do believe that we're each other's biggest fans, and we're sorry we hurt each other.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. Yes. So the avoidant, for these people, it's really important to know that you have an overactive defense mechanism. And
I've been
while
told,
your inner world feels safe, it feels regulated, that feels good to you, and the other person is overstimulating their need.
Exactly.
It feels excessive, it feels overwhelming, and actually is a turnoff, like you're wanting to push them away.
So
You
I've
may
been told.
love the person, but their neediness feels gross and off-putting. So
And dangerous.
be aware. Yeah, and dangerous, because it's trying to get past my walls. The issue is when we have walls, it's like there's a drawbridge of where relationship happens, and you're protecting you, not we. And so when me is protected, I have now abandoned the other person, and their protest to try to connect is actually a healthy bid to connect. It may not be expressed in a healthy way, but the desire to restore connection, although they are not a therapist who knows how to explain what they're feeling and articulate it properly, that longing to connect is actually a healthy sign. And when they stop trying to connect with you, that's actually when you have a dead marriage.
Yeah, and they'll find substitutes, whether it's self-med or whether it's affairs. And often the abandonment issues for someone who's anxious, that's how they got to be anxious in the first place, is they sensed abandonment from a primary caregiver. And then if they married someone who's avoidant, they're going to get that time and time and time again. And that is the right word, is abandonment.
Exactly.
And thick-headed people like me need to hear that word, is that my actions just may possibly, kind of theoretically, make other people feel abandoned.
Exactly. And so if we don't deal with that, we are egocentric, we're narcissistic, we're protecting ourselves, and we're leaving the other person uncovered. And that's going to evoke insecurity and anxiety. So as much as you feel like, oh my gosh, they're overwhelming, you're evoking that response. And if you'll lower that drawbridge, and it may feel scary and overwhelming, that's where we just say, hey, protector, I acknowledge your desires to protect me from being enmeshed, overtaken. Maybe you had a parent that just kind of over immersed themselves into your life. I honor that and I validate that. But the people today don't deserve those walls. And so, Jesus, I ask you to join the protector part of me. Protector part of me, I want you to meet my friend Jesus. He's not going to take over control, but he is going to provide support and reinforcements. And I'm wondering if I just practice lowering these defense mechanisms and I offer love and I pursue and I invite, if it actually down regulates my spouse, and as they feel secure, they self-regulate and they don't have such neediness and anxiety and crazy weird behavior, because they're not feeling flooded and abandoned anymore. When
Right.
I, as the leader, change that, male or female, and
Right.
I offer and I pursue and I invite love, I'm using that drawbridge. Now they're
Right.
getting love inside versus saying, well, I mean, I told you I love you like 10 years ago. I mean, I bring home food. I mean, I'm not cheating on you. I'm right here. But yet there's such a
Happy
wall.
Valentine's, babe. Yeah.
Yeah. And we can feel it intuitively. And
Yeah.
so, as much as it feels like the rational, superior posture to be the avoider who is, practical and they can quote scripture and they can keep their cool while the other one's emotional and looks crazy.
Oh, they have reasons.
Yeah. I've learned to really pay attention. The people that are comfortable in dysfunction actually are the people that need to do more work than the one that's not comfortable in dysfunction. What we're doing is not healthy. And to have some level of like angst about that is actually a good sign. When they stop having that, now we know we've drifted and we've become roommates.
Would you say, and I'm just testing a theory, would many CEOs be avoidant?
I think that would be a generalization.
Oh,
A lot of
yeah. What do you
CEOs
think?
can be eights, which is challenger driver. So they could be goal oriented. And when the goal surpasses the bid to connect, that would feel very avoidant. I have had some say they're reformed CEOs or reformed eights and challengers.
Sure. Sure.
So I think it's possible to work on it, but it probably is more likely anybody in a leadership position. So it could also be pastors. I've seen pastors who have all the right
No, we're
words.
caregivers. We're shepherds. We're concerned about the flock. What do you mean?
And yet those are the people that sometimes are the most emotionally pulled back and looking at their spouse like, look, isn't this one crazy?
Oh my gosh.
And unaware that they're actually evoking the anxiety in their partner. So anybody
and we fill our
leadership...
board, we fill our staff with people who are anxious because they tend to be perfectionists and hard workers.
And then they're trying to please me all the time, so I get the results that I want. It works.
It works for a while. It works for a while.
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, so this tool, the attachment theory, I found extremely helpful. We put it in our Good Enough Parent program for parents and teenagers. But we give them a simple survey from Bartholomew and Horowitz, 4 paragraphs, so they can kind of identify from a lay point of view which of the 4 quadrants they fit in, so they can begin to have these conversations. And if both spouses or boyfriends, girlfriends, or whatever partners can have these conversations, I think common words, common approach, a common sense. I've got baggage, you've got baggage. I'd like to hear your baggage. It's safe here. That kind of conversation is actually more helpful than, what you said hurt me. Boy, then we get into that defensive cycle. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Positive reinforcement, right?
Yeah.
So the more my face represents criticism, contempt, a complaint, the more that negative chemistry will happen just at my face. Versus if I try to spend 70% or more giving positive reinforcement, play, laughter, engaging with one another, being friends, having positive reinforcement. Now, when they just look at my face, now there's more likely to be a positive chemical reaction, and they're going to show more of their real self versus unconsciously the protector comes up of what's going to happen today.
Of course. And attachment theorists, I love this, and I think it's encouraging for infants anyway. They have good enough. That's where we got the name for our program. They say 3 out of 10 interactions with your infant. I mean, your infant's going to be colically, they're going to try, they're going to be wet, they're going to be miserable sometimes. But if you can do 3 out of 10 interactions that are attuning, your child will go into the next stage of life secure.
Yes.
That's doable.
Right.
I can't do 10, 5 pushing it. I can do 3. And same thing with teenagers, and same thing maybe with spouses. That 3 out of 10 of my interactions can be, hey, look, I know I said what I said, but I got to tell you, I'm not going anywhere. I'm your biggest fan still. I've got your back. What you said hurt me. We got to deal with that. But I'm here and I'm loving you. And I got to figure all this out, but I'm not going anywhere. I just think 3 out of 10 is probably a good goal.
Absolutely. And I do want to make sure we circle back and say attuning, while that's common for us, you think of it like a tuning fork, an instrument, that many times we talk at a cerebral level, which just means transfer of information. Like, did you pick up the kids? Do we have enough milk? What's our agenda for the weekend? But when I'm hearing and I'm attuning, I'm actually trying to get to the heart frequency. So I'm being more emotion focused.
That's really good.
And so attuning, just in a practical, if someone's listening and they're like, okay, how do I do that? The practical is, hey, baby, your eyes look tired. Are you okay? I'm wondering how your day has been. No, but
look
I mean,
them in the eyes.
Really, how has your day been? You know, I would love to be a safe place. Is there anything else going on? And not reacting or punishing them on accident because I have some big reaction to what they just shared, but creating what's called a holding environment, where it doesn't mean physically touching. It means I'm holding and containing what they're sharing so they get it out. And now I'm holding it so they don't have to carry that burden. And now it can be released.
That's good.
Many times, the person that has high need often is unaware the other person has need in the relationship, but the more high functioning one tends to carry it longer. So if you've received a lot from your partner, be proactive to pursue their heart. Like, hey, I'm curious how that impacted you, or I recognize this. I'm wondering, the other day when you said your secretary undermined you in this way or whatever, I'm wondering how that impacted you. And they may blow you off and say, oh, nothing, blah, blah, blah. The more that you pursue and just say, hey, I'd like to be a safe place if you'd like to talk about it.
Yeah. Have you seen the YouTube video, still face experiment?
Yes.
I recommend that for anybody because you can see what attunement is and what the effect looks like when the mother goes still face. It really is educational.
Absolutely.
To see that in process and realize we adults do that too.
Absolutely. Yep. So for anyone who's curious, it's the still face experiment. And it's also based on some of the Harvard research on serve and return, where like if you were playing tennis, where the baby or the partner, in this case, the romantic partner, is giving you feedback and then you play back in a sweet way, not in like a playing games, but like if they're being playful, try to engage playfully. If they're being serious, take them seriously and don't just laugh it off. You're trying to serve and return. Like, I hear you. I see what you're trying to communicate. And I want you to know that I can hold and contain that and I can meet you there. That deepens the resonance of how much we can feel known, cared for, and invested into. And again, taking the armor off and feeling truly safe in the context of this relationship.
We need communities where we're encouraging one another to do this. It's harder than it looks.
Yes. It's a lot of self-regulating in order to be there and love someone else more than my immediate need in the moment. Yeah. Okay, this is amazing. All right. So how do people connect with you? I know we have Valentine's coming up. And what are your thoughts on how people can continue to invest, whether they're single or in a relationship?
Oh, yeah. Or Christian or not. The brain's the brain, right? So I do have a special Valentine's podcast. I do a regular podcast called Gospel Rant. In February, we'll be doing a 3-part Valentine's Day where we talk about the neuroscience of love and sex and addiction. They're all linked together. We talk about the history of love. The Romans, I think I mentioned before, they were afraid of love, and we've been affected by that more than we were affected by the Middle Ages or Victorians. And Paul walked into that. If you know your Bible, he actually had to confront that kind of crazy love. And then the last one to be is, what does the actual love of God looks like? And it's different than there's a misunderstanding of agape and eros, and we're going to try to clear that up for a lot of fun. I also have the Good Enough Parent, goodenoughparent.online, that people can go to. You don't have to be parents, but it's specifically for parents and teens, but for anybody who wants to know the attachment theory. And we give people surveys on how they can find their attachment styles. It's very helpful. And lots of other stuff. They can contact me if they have any questions. My website is gospel-app.com. Lots of stuff on there about millennials, about adults, about a number of things. But they can contact me if they have any questions. Bill at gospel-app.com.
Awesome. Well, this has been such a privilege. Thank you for geeking out on chemicals and brain neuroscience and parenting and love. So thank you, Bill. And we will see you all for the next episode. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Dr. Crawford.
You're welcome.